Utilities Commission that runs the water supply.
When you got the facts, Jim, or Stan Cable got the facts, why did Stan Cable not say anything, come to either you or Dave Thompson and say, hey guys, we got a problem. Our water sample from the 15th is all of a sudden contaminated. Let's inform the health unit and let's inform the public that we've got a problem. As of May 15th, we got the notice on the 18th. Come on, what's the reasoning there?
Perhaps the strongest allegation from the chief medical officer that none of the deaths that have occurred so far needed to happen.
We wasted our time looking for a food source of contamination when in fact they could have told us right away that this was in the water, and we could have said, tell the people not to drink the water.
But for those looking for answers, they may not come immediately. The Ministry of the Environment has launched an investigation here, and the Public Utilities Commission says it may not be able to answer any more questions until that investigation is completed. Norman Hermont, CBC News, Walkerton, Ontario.
Talks aimed at resolving the illegal health strike in Alberta have halted for now. Negotiators are taking a break after bargaining all night long. The union says it has presented its final offer. Nearly 10,000 healthcare workers have been off the job since yesterday morning. The CBC's Serena Ma has the latest from Edmonton.
Licensed practical nurses, nursing attendants, and support staff at hospitals are still out on the street today. They say they'll stay here until they get a settlement. The mood on the line has changed somewhat overnight. Yesterday, as talks resumed, people were more optimistic. Today, with no progress made, the union and its members say negotiations are not going their way. Still, they say their fight isn't over and they won't be giving up.
We have nowhere to move. I believe the employers know they have the gun to our head. I believe the legislature, some of them know that. I believe Ralph Klein is sincere when he says he'd like to see this over. If I was him, I wouldn't want health care on the front pages. I don't want it on the front pages right now. We need a settlement.
Our wages are absolutely appalling. We're making probably the least amount of money in Canada for a licensed practical nurse, and yet our standards are one of the highest.
Now, the union says in order to get that settlement, key issues must be addressed by their employer. Those are contracting out, wages, and benefits. Meanwhile, the hospitals are hit hard by the strike, and they're prepared to ship patients out of province and to the United States for proper care. Serena Ma, CBC News, Edmonton.
The remains of Canada's unknown soldier are on their way home from France. The unidentified soldier left Canada more than 80 years ago to fight in the First World War. He was killed and buried near Vimy Ridge, one of thousands of Canadians who died but could never be identified. The CBC's Don Murray has more on one soldier's journey and what he means to Canadians.
He was taken from a grave marked only "Known unto God," a soldier of the First World War, a Canadian. He was brought this morning to the imposing monument at Vimy Ridge, a monument on which are inscribed the names of 11,285 Canadian soldiers killed but never found in that war. Vimy was a great and bloody battle, and a great victory for Canadian troops.
A lot of historians consider Vimy the place where Canada became a nation. And I think so it's very significant that we take a soldier that fell there.
This was a ceremony where old men gathered and old men remembered, veterans of the First and of other wars.
We will never forget their service and their sacrifice.
Canada's Minister of Veterans Affairs spoke of the significance of the ceremony.
Canada's unknown soldier will represent all Canadians in our history who came forward for the principles of peace and freedom.
The oldest among the veterans was Paul Métivier. He is 100 years old. He read the Act of Remembrance today. He fought at Vimy. He lost a son in the Second World War, a son never found. One among almost 30,000 Canadians who were killed and lost in 20th century conflicts.
Oh, I think it is very important. In fact, we were the only participating country that didn't have a tomb for the unknown soldier.
A lone bagpiper played atop the monument. The sun broke through thick cloud. A soldier of the Great War left on a long last journey, a journey that will end this evening in Canada, a journey to a second and final burial Sunday in the tomb of the unknown soldier. Don Murray, CBC News, Vimy Ridge.
The body of the unknown soldier is expected to arrive back in Canada in about an hour. News will give you live coverage of that ceremony at the airport in Ottawa right after this newscast. Don Newman is there. He'll be hosting the event. Makers of genetically modified food from 6 countries began a conference in Italy today, but outside, protesters rallied against GM food. Farmers, environmentalists, and politicians from councils that have banned GM foods tried to march on the meeting. They carried banners and shouted slogans against the genetic manipulation of food. The police were waiting for them with clubs and tear gas. Police are bracing for more trouble before the international conference ends on Friday. A motion before the U.S. Senate to normalize trade relations with China is running into opposition from both parties. Yesterday, the House of Representatives approved the bill, and that was greeted with relief in Beijing. As Raymond St. Pierre reports, workers at a factory near the capital are happy about the vote.
At the China Garments Company, rows of workers hustled to finish an order to South America. For the moment, almost everything produced in this factory is exported to South American countries where there are no quotas and low tariffs. But ambitions are higher here, where workers have their sights set on the giant U.S. market. More exports would mean more orders for factories like this one and more jobs. I feel that if our factory gets more orders, our salaries can be increased by at least 30%, he says. There will be more work for us, and the more we do, the more money we'll get, she says. And that means a lot here, because the average worker earns only $1,000 a year. The factory has even set aside a piece of land nearby in the hopes of expanding. If the market demand suddenly increases, we're ready to react as fast as possible, says the factory general manager. We can also expand, build a new factory. The idea is already in our head. Workers here know the benefits permanent normal trade relations will give China, but wait for the even bigger prize, entry into the World Trade Organization, something that is likely to happen this year. Raymond St. Pierre, CBC News, near Beijing.
Eritrean troops are pulling out of a strip of land they've spent 2 years fighting for, but Ethiopia says that won't be enough to end the war. Eritrea seized the territory at the start of the conflict 2 years ago. The retreat comes after heavy days of fighting. Ethiopia has recovered all the land it lost to Eritrea, but the government says it won't consider the war over until Eritrea's army is no longer a threat. Tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians have been killed on both sides of the fighting. And now to recap our top story. A 5th person has died from the E. coli outbreak in Walkerton, Ontario, and 10 people are now listed in critical condition. A meeting with the provincial police and the coroner's office has been scheduled for tomorrow. They'll decide whether or not criminal charges will be laid. And remember, you can always get the latest news and program highlights and Newsworld's latest newscast. Check our website. The address is newsworld.cbc.ca. And that's the latest news for this Thursday, May 25th. I'm Christopher Thomas. And now back to midday for those of you watching on CBC TV. Coming up on Newsworld, live coverage of the return of Canada's unknown soldier with your host, Don Newman.